The sound that broke my world wasn't a gunshot or a car crash. It was a chuckle. A low, dismissive, almost relieved chuckle from my husband, Mark, as I stood in our kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, sobbing uncontrollably. My sister had just told me our mother was gone. He was in his home office, on what I thought was the most important conference call of his career, and he thought I couldn't hear him. But I did. Through the cracked door and my own shattered breathing, I heard that single, heartless sound. In that moment, 15 years of marriage, of sacrifice, of a life I thought was perfect, turned to ash and ice. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have fathomed, was that the man who held my husband's career in his hands, a man I barely knew, had heard it too. And that one, terrible sound, was about to unravel a web of deceit so dark, so calculated, it would nearly destroy me before it set me free. Before I tell you how that one terrible moment of cruelty led to a discovery that would expose my husband's double life and a plan more sinister than I could ever imagine, I need you to do something for me. Please, hit that like button right now. It helps so much. If you're new here, welcome to the family. Go ahead and subscribe and make sure you turn on those notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. And drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one. Trust me when I tell you, you are going to want to stay buckled in for every single second of this story. Because the truth is always worse than you think, but justice is so much sweeter. To understand the depth of the betrayal, you have to understand the life he shattered. Our life. From the outside, we were the picture of suburban perfection. We lived in a 2-story colonial on a tree-lined street in Northwood, the kind of neighborhood where people jogging in the morning actually smiled and waved. Our lawn was meticulously manicured, a green velvet carpet that I spent hours on every spring, planting tulips and hydrangeas that our neighbors always complimented. Inside, our home was a Pottery Barn catalog come to life, warm neutrals, family photos on every surface, and the faint, comforting scent of whatever I was baking that day. We had 2 beautiful children. Liam, our thoughtful, serious 10-year-old with Mark's dark hair and my deep blue eyes, and 7-year-old Sophie, a whirlwind of blonde curls and infectious laughter, who was the spitting image of my mother. My days were a carefully orchestrated ballet of domesticity. I was up at 5:30 every morning, long before the sun. I'd grind the coffee beans for Mark's French press just the way he liked it, pack 2 healthy, note-adorned lunchboxes for the kids, and have a hot breakfast on the table by the time they all came downstairs. After the school run, my day was a flurry of errands, laundry, grocery shopping, volunteering at the school library, and keeping our home pristine. In the afternoons, it was soccer practice for Liam and ballet for Sophie. Then homework, dinner, baths, and bedtime stories. I was the keeper of schedules, the finder of lost things, the kisser of scraped knees, and the silent, ever-present force that made our family run. I did it all so Mark could focus on his career. He was a rising star, a vice president of acquisitions at a major investment firm, and I was the perfect corporate wife. I hosted his work dinners, remembering the names of his colleagues' children and which wine his boss preferred. I was his support system, his cheerleader, his partner in all things. Or so I believed. It hadn't always been this way. We met in college. He was the impossibly handsome, ambitious business major who commanded every room he walked into. I was a quiet, fiercely intelligent finance prodigy on a full scholarship, set to graduate top of my class. I had a job offer from one of the biggest firms in New York City waiting for me, a corner office in my future. But Mark swept me off my feet. He saw past my nerdy glasses and textbooks. He made me laugh. He told me I was the smartest, most beautiful woman he'd ever met. He proposed a year after we graduated at a scenic overlook in the mountains, with a ring he'd saved for months to buy. He promised me the world. He promised we would build an empire together, side by side. Our wedding was a dream, a sun-drenched afternoon in my parents' garden. The photos on our mantelpiece captured it all: the hope, the trust, the absolute certainty that our love was forever. 2 years into our marriage, when I was pregnant with Liam, Mark got a huge promotion. The catch? It was in a different state, 300 miles away from my dream job and our families. "It's the fast track, Clara," he'd said, his eyes shining with ambition. "This is our chance. We can build that life we talked about. You won't have to work. You can focus on the baby, on us." I remember the pang of giving up my career, the life I'd worked so hard for. But I looked at his hopeful face, felt the flutter of our son inside me, and I said yes. I chose him. I chose our family. I poured all of my intelligence and ambition into creating the perfect life for him, for our children. I managed our investments, growing our nest egg with a skill that impressed even our accountant. I taught myself gourmet cooking. I learned about landscaping and interior design. I subsumed my identity into his, becoming Mrs. Mark Miller, the devoted wife and mother. And for a long time, I thought it was enough. I thought I was happy. Our life was a performance, and we played our parts perfectly. At neighborhood barbecues, other husbands would clap Mark on the back and say, "You've got it made, man," while their wives would pull me aside and ask, "How do you do it all? You make it look so easy." My own family, with the exception of my sister Emily, adored him. My father saw him as the successful son he'd never had. My mother, bless her heart, thought he was the most charming man on earth. She loved how he'd bring her flowers and call her just to check in. It was all a lie, of course, but he was a masterful actor. I was his greatest prop, the living proof of his success and stability. I defended him. I praised him. I built him up to everyone we knew. Because I loved him. And because I had staked my entire life on the belief that he loved me too. I had given up everything for him, and the thought that it might have been for nothing was too terrifying to even contemplate. So I didn't. I polished the silver, fluffed the pillows, and smiled my perfect, supportive wife smile, completely oblivious to the rot that was festering just beneath the flawless surface of our lives. Looking back now, the signs were all there. Not like flashing neon signs, but like faint, unsettling whispers in a quiet room. They were small enough to be explained away, to be rationalized by a woman who desperately wanted to believe in the fairy tale she had built. The change started subtly, about a year before my mother passed. It was a slow cooling, a gradual drawing away that I first attributed to the immense pressure he was under at work. He was gunning for a senior VP position, and the stress, I told myself, was immense. The warm, lingering hugs when he came home from work became perfunctory pecks on the cheek. The easy laughter we used to share over dinner was replaced by a tense silence, his eyes often glued to his phone. When I'd try to talk to him, to connect, he'd wave a dismissive hand. "Not now, Clara. I'm swamped. You wouldn't understand the pressure." He made me feel like my world of school runs and bake sales was trivial compared to his of mergers and acquisitions. And I, wanting to be the supportive wife, accepted it. I gave him his space. I told myself it was just a phase. Then there was the phone. His phone had always been like a third appendage, but now it was a fortress. It used to lie on the kitchen counter, open to the world. Suddenly, it was perpetually face down or tucked securely in his pocket. A new, complex password appeared that I didn't know. He started taking calls outside or in the garage, his voice dropping to a low murmur if I walked by. One evening, I asked him who was calling so late. He shot me a look of pure irritation. "It's the Tokyo office, Clara. It's confidential. I can't risk you or the kids overhearing something sensitive." He said it with such authority, such weariness, that I felt ashamed for even asking. I was being paranoid. I was adding to his stress. I apologized and retreated, leaving him to his secrets. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, the father of my children. His schedule became erratic. The late nights at the office became more frequent, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. Then came the last-minute business trips. A weekend in Chicago for a conference he'd never mentioned before. A 3-day trip to San Francisco to put out a fire. He'd come home exhausted, smelling faintly of a cloying, sweet perfume that wasn't mine. One night, the scent was so strong I couldn't ignore it. "Mark, what's that smell? It's all over your suit." He didn't even look at me, just shrugged off his jacket. "It's probably Jessica from marketing. The woman bathes in that garbage. We were all crammed into a conference room for hours." He said her name so casually, so dismissively. He then turned it on me, a classic gaslighting technique I didn't recognize at the time. "Honestly, Clara, are you accusing me of something? After I've been working my tail off for this family? I'm exhausted. I don't need an interrogation." Again, I felt that familiar sting of guilt. I was being needy, suspicious. I was failing him. The financial irregularities were harder to ignore, even for me. I had always managed our finances. It was the one piece of my old life I'd held on to. But Mark had insisted on getting his own credit card for work expenses, separate from our joint accounts. One day, a statement was accidentally mailed to our house instead of his office. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was filled with charges I couldn't explain. A $200 dinner at a romantic French bistro downtown that I'd never been to. A charge for a $500 necklace from Tiffany's, a gift I certainly never received. A weekend stay at a boutique hotel right here in our own city. When I confronted him, my heart pounding, he had a smooth, plausible explanation for everything. "The dinner was with a client, honey. I told you about that. The necklace was a retirement gift for one of the partners. And the hotel? The firm put up the whole team there for a strategy weekend. It was mandatory." His answers were so quick, so confident. He made my questions seem ridiculous. I wanted to believe him so badly that I chose to ignore the cold knot of dread in my stomach. The cruelest sign, the one that still makes my blood run cold, was his behavior during my mother's illness. My mom was my rock, my best friend. When she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, my world tilted on its axis. I spent every possible moment at her side, at the hospital, at her home. Mark, however, grew increasingly impatient with my grief. He'd sigh with exasperation when I'd get a call from the hospice nurse. "Can't your sister handle it this time? I have that quarterly review dinner, and I really need you there." He made my devotion to my dying mother feel like an inconvenience, a disruption to his life. He'd complain about having to order pizza for the kids because I was at the hospital. He made me feel guilty for being a daughter. My sister, Emily, saw it clearly. "He's a cold-hearted snake, Clara," she'd said fiercely one day. "I don't know how you don't see it." I defended him, of course. "He's just stressed, Em. He doesn't handle sickness well." I made excuses for his cruelty because the alternative, that the man I loved was incapable of empathy, was too monstrous to face. I was so blind, so incredibly, painfully blind. But my eyes were about to be forced wide open. It was a Tuesday night, a night that will forever be seared into my memory as the end of my life as I knew it. It was 10:47 p.m. I know the exact time because I was staring at the digital clock on the microwave, willing the phone not to ring, even though I knew it would. My mother had been slipping away for days, and my sister Emily and I were taking turns staying at the hospice. It was my night to be home with the kids, a decision that still haunts me. I was standing in the kitchen, my body thrumming with a terrible, anxious energy, when my cell phone buzzed on the granite countertop. Emily's face flashed on the screen. I knew before I answered. I swiped to accept the call, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. "Em?" I whispered. I heard a choked sob on the other end, a sound of pure, final grief. "She's gone, Clara," Emily wept. "She went so peacefully, just a few minutes ago. She's gone." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and a sound I didn't recognize tore from my own throat, a raw, animal wail of loss. My knees buckled, and I slid down the kitchen cabinets to the cold tile floor, curling into a ball as if to protect myself from the unbearable pain. The world dissolved into a blur of tears and ragged breaths. My mother, my beautiful, strong, kind mother, was gone. Through my own storm of grief, I was vaguely aware of Mark. He was in his home office, just down the hall. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light cutting across the dark hallway floor. He was on a conference call, a huge one with his boss, Mr. Harrison, and the executive board, finalizing the details of the merger that would likely secure his promotion to senior VP. He had told me not to disturb him under any circumstances. But this was a circumstance beyond any rule. I needed him. I needed my husband. Stumbling to my feet, I made my way to his office door, pushing it open. He looked up, his face a mask of annoyance, his hand held up to stop me. He was wearing his noise-canceling headset. I just shook my head, tears streaming down my face, unable to form words. I pointed at my phone, then mouthed, "It's Mom." He held up a finger, signaling me to wait, and spoke into his microphone. "Gentlemen, if you'll excuse me for just one moment." He pressed the mute button on his headset's control panel. Or, at least, he thought he did. He slid the headset off, letting it rest around his neck. "What is it, Clara? I'm in the middle of the most important call of my life." "Mark," I sobbed, the words barely audible. "It's Mom. She's gone." For a split second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not sadness, not shock, but something else. Calculation. He arranged his face into a mask of sympathy. "Oh, honey, okay, I'm so sorry to hear that." He gave my shoulder a brief, awkward pat. "Listen, I'm right at the climax of this call with Harrison. This is my whole career on the line. Let me just wrap this up, and I'll be right out. I'll be 5 minutes." He was already turning back to his desk, dismissing my earth-shattering news as an inconvenient interruption. He sat back down in his chair, his back to me. He must have thought I had already left the room, or that my grief had rendered me deaf and blind. As he reached for his headset, he let out the sound. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet, private sound, not meant for my ears. A low, breathy chuckle. And then, under his breath, a single, venomous word, full of relief and triumph. Finally. Time stopped. The air in the room turned to glass. My sobs caught in my throat. I couldn't breathe. My heart, which had just been breaking for my mother, now felt like it had been ripped from my chest and stomped on. Finally. An obstacle removed. A problem solved. My mother's death was a convenience for him. The man I had loved for 15 years, the father of my children, had just laughed at the news that my mother was dead. As I stood there, frozen in silent horror, a voice crackled from the headset still resting around his neck, a voice that was clear and cold, and filled with disbelief. "Mark? What did you just say?" It was Mr. Harrison. Mark hadn't muted the call. He had broadcast his monstrous relief to the entire executive board. Panic flared in Mark's eyes. He grabbed the headset, fumbling with the controls, his face draining of all color. "Mr. Harrison, sir, that was a misunderstanding," he stammered, before frantically ending the call. He turned to look at me, his face a mess of terror and rage. But he wasn't looking at his wife anymore. He was looking at a ghost. The woman he knew, the trusting, naive, supportive woman, had died in that hallway, and in her place stood someone he had never met, someone forged in the ice of his own cruelty. That night was a descent into a special kind of hell. Sleep was an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. That soft, triumphant chuckle. It echoed in the silent house, a soundtrack to my grief. The sorrow I felt for my mother was a vast, dark ocean. But now, it was poisoned with the acid of betrayal. The two emotions were horrifically intertwined, inseparable. I cried until my body was dehydrated and my throat was raw, but the tears were for two losses now. My mother and the man I thought I had married. I lay in our king-sized bed, the space beside me feeling like a mile-wide chasm. Mark had tried to come to bed, had tried to touch me, to murmur empty apologies about stress and misunderstandings. I had flinched away from him as if his touch were fire, and with a muttered curse, he had retreated to the guest room. I was glad. I couldn't bear the thought of his skin against mine. His every breath, every touch, was a lie. My mind, usually so orderly, was a chaotic storm. I replayed 15 years of memories, but they were all tainted, distorted by this new, horrific truth. Our wedding vows, a mockery. The birth of our children, a backdrop for his long-term deception. Every "I love you," every anniversary gift, every shared smile across a dinner table, it was all a performance. The red flags I had so diligently ignored now billowed in my mind like giant, blood-red sails on a pirate ship, and I was the fool who had mistaken it for a lifeboat. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the smell of perfume, the financial discrepancies, it wasn't just stress. It was a plan. A life he was living without me. Sometime before dawn, as the first gray light began to seep through the blinds, the grief and the shock began to curdle into something else. Something hard and cold and sharp. It started as a low burn in my belly, a feeling I hadn't felt in years. Rage. Pure, undiluted fury. He hadn't just been unfaithful. He hadn't just been distant. He had been cruel. He had mocked the deepest pain of my life for his own convenience. He had stood on the foundation of the life I had sacrificed everything to build for him, and laughed as it crumbled. Something inside me snapped. The soft, accommodating, people-pleasing woman who made perfect pot roasts and ironed his shirts with military precision was gone. She had been incinerated by that single, heartless chuckle. Lying there in the dark, I made a vow. I would not just cry. I would not just pack my bags and leave with the children. That would be too easy for him. That would be letting him win. No. I was going to find out everything. Every lie, every secret, every stolen dollar. I was going to uncover the entire, rotten truth. And then, I was going to burn his world to the ground. He had grossly underestimated the woman whose finances he'd let manage their entire life. He had forgotten that I was a finance prodigy before I was his wife, and I was about to give him a reminder he would never forget. The next morning, I moved through the house like an automaton, my grief a heavy cloak around my shoulders. I got the children ready for school, my movements mechanical, my voice a hollow echo of its usual warmth. Liam, ever perceptive, looked at me with worried eyes. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked. I knelt and hugged him tightly, burying my face in his hair. "Grandma's in heaven now, sweetie," I whispered. "And Mom is just very, very sad. But I'm going to be okay. We're going to be okay." It was a promise to him and to myself. Mark was a ghost in his own home, avoiding my eyes, speaking in clipped, nervous sentences. He was terrified, not because he had hurt me, but because his boss had overheard him. His career was in jeopardy, and that was the only thing that mattered to him. He left for work without another word. Around noon, the doorbell rang. It was a delivery from a high-end florist. The bouquet was enormous, a tasteful and extravagant arrangement of white lilies and roses. I assumed it was a corporate gesture from Mark's firm, a standard sympathy offering. But the card was not from the company. It was a thick, cream-colored card, embossed with a single H. My hands trembled as I read the elegant script inside. "Clara, my deepest condolences on the loss of your mother. She was a remarkable woman. My late wife, Eleanor, always spoke so highly of her from their time together on the hospital charity board. If there is anything at all you need, personally or otherwise, please do not hesitate to call my private number. Sincerely, Robert Harrison." He had written his personal cell phone number at the bottom. It was an olive branch, a lifeline. Mr. Harrison wasn't just my husband's boss. He was a widower. He understood grief. And he had heard what Mark had done. He was offering help. My first call was to my sister. Emily was at my house within 20 minutes, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression fierce. I told her everything. The chuckle, the muttered word, the fact that his boss had heard it all. She didn't look surprised, only vindicated in her long-held dislike for Mark. "That monster!" she seethed. "I always knew there was something wrong with him." "What are you going to do, Clara?" "I'm not going to run," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm going to find out what he's been hiding. All of it." Emily squeezed my hand, her grip like steel. "Good. You're not alone in this. Whatever you need, a place to stay, someone to watch the kids, an alibi, I'm here." Her loyalty was a balm on my raw heart. With my sister by my side, I felt a flicker of strength. Then I looked at the card from Mr. Harrison. It felt like an audacious, terrifying step, but I knew I had to take it. I dialed the number. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm and professional. "Harrison." "Mr. Harrison, it's Clara Miller," I said, my voice barely a whisper. His tone softened immediately. "Clara, thank you for calling. I hope I didn't overstep with the flowers." "No, not at all. They're beautiful." "Thank you," I managed. "I'm calling because, well, I don't know why I'm calling exactly." There was a pause. "Clara," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I will not pretend I didn't hear what I heard last night. It was unconscionable. I have known Mark for 10 years, and I am beginning to suspect I don't know him at all. Your mother was a fine woman. What happened was not right." Tears pricked my eyes, but this time they were tears of validation. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined his cruelty. "I think he's hiding something," I confessed. "More than just this. There are things that haven't added up for a long time." "I believe you," he said simply. "Legally, my hands are tied. I can't fire him for a private conversation, no matter how reprehensible. But Mark has a major presentation this Friday. He's presenting a strategy he developed for the acquisition of a smaller firm. His promotion to senior VP is riding on it. If there were any discrepancies, In his professional or financial conduct, that would be another matter entirely. The unspoken offer hung in the air. He couldn't act without cause. But he was inviting me to give him one. A plan, cold and clear, began to form in my mind. "Mr. Harrison?" I said, a new resolve hardening my voice. "My husband has forgotten that I have a degree in forensic accounting." "I see," he replied, a hint of approval in his tone. "The presentation is Friday at 10 a.m. That gives you 3 days." The moment Mark left for work the next day, our home transformed from a crime scene into an investigation headquarters. Emily came over to watch the kids, taking them to the park to give me space and silence. I went straight to his home office, the room where my world had ended, and began my search. I was no longer a grieving wife. I was a forensic accountant on the most important case of my life. My own heart was the client. I started with his desk. It was neat, organized, the desk of a man who projected an image of control. But I knew better. I knew that men like Mark, arrogant and overconfident, always get sloppy. In the back of his bottom filing cabinet, tucked inside a folder labeled Old Tax Returns, I found it. A stack of credit card statements for a Visa card I didn't know existed. The statements were mailed to a P.O. box, but this was a spare copy he'd foolishly kept. My hands were steady as I laid them out on the floor. The charges were a roadmap of his secret life. There were dinners at Le Ciel, the city's most romantic and expensive restaurant. On nights he was supposedly working late. There were weekend stays at a luxurious spa resort 2 hours away. On weekends, he was supposedly at a leadership retreat. And then I saw the jewelry charges. A pair of diamond earrings from Cartier, a delicate gold bracelet from Tiffany's, a silk scarf from Hermès. Gifts I had never seen for a woman who was not me. The name on one of the hotel receipts was listed as Mr. and Mrs. Miller, a cruel twist of the knife. He wasn't just cheating, he was living a parallel version of our life with someone else. Next, I turned to his personal laptop. It was password protected, of course. I tried the kids' birthdays, our anniversary, his mother's maiden name. Nothing. Then, a cold thought struck me. I typed in the date my mother was diagnosed with cancer. The screen unlocked. A wave of nausea washed over me. The cruelty was deeper than I could have imagined. He had used the beginning of my greatest pain as the key to his secret world. I went straight for his email. Most folders were work-related, boring. But one stood out. It was labeled Project Lighthouse. My heart hammered against my ribs. It sounded like a work project, a perfect disguise. I clicked it open. It was not a work project. It was the detailed, systematic plan for his new life. A life that did not include me or our children. The emails were between him and J.R. I quickly cross-referenced the name with his company directory. Jessica Reynolds, the marketing colleague he had mentioned, the woman who bathed in that cloying perfume. The emails were sickening. They spoke of our future, of being free from his unstable, clinging wife. They discussed my draining family situation and how my mother's illness was finally reaching its conclusion. They were waiting for my mother to die so they could execute their plan without him looking like a complete monster for leaving his grieving wife. There were architectural plans attached to one email, blueprints for a sprawling, modern house on a piece of land they had already purchased in another state. There were financial projections, detailing how he would leverage his new salary and bonus as senior VP to fund their new life. And there were bank statements from an account I didn't recognize, an account in his name only. I cross-referenced the dates of the deposits with withdrawals from our joint savings account. He had been systematically siphoning money for over a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars, moving it into his secret fund. He was stealing from his own family, from his own children, to build a new life on the ashes of ours. But the final discovery was the one that made me physically ill. Buried in a subfolder labeled Insurance, I found a PDF copy of a new life insurance policy. It was on me. He had taken it out 6 months prior. A $2 million policy that named him as the sole beneficiary. That alone was chilling. But it was the other files in the folder that stopped my breath. There were screenshots from medical websites, browser histories of his searches. He had been researching my mother's chemotherapy drugs and her heart medication. He had been looking up lethal interactions, overdose symptoms, drugs that could mimic a natural heart attack. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just waiting for my mother to die. He had been researching how to kill her. And with a new insurance policy on me, I had to wonder, was I next? I felt like I was going to vomit. This wasn't just infidelity and theft. This was monstrous. This was evil. My hands shaking uncontrollably, I copied every file, every statement, every email onto a secure, password-protected flash drive. I took photos of the paper statements with my phone. I documented everything. The grief was still there, a constant, heavy weight. But now, it was accompanied by a terrifying clarity. I wasn't just fighting for my dignity anymore. I was fighting for my life. I called Mr. Harrison. My voice was a choked whisper. "I have everything," I said. "It's worse than you can imagine." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he spoke, his voice grim and resolute. "The presentation is on Friday at 10 a.m. Be at my office by 9:45. And Clara, be strong." The day of the confrontation was surreal. I woke up feeling a strange, terrifying calm. I chose my outfit with the precision of a general preparing for battle. A charcoal gray power suit I hadn't worn in a decade, a crisp white silk blouse, and heels that made me feel tall and formidable. I did my makeup carefully, covering the dark circles under my eyes, adding a slash of bold red lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the heartbroken stay-at-home mom. I saw the woman I was supposed to be, the finance prodigy, the fighter. Emily came over to stay with the children, her eyes full of a mixture of fear and pride. She hugged me tightly at the door. "Go get him, Clara," she whispered fiercely. "For you, for Mom." Driving downtown, I felt strangely detached, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. I walked into the gleaming, glass and steel lobby of Mark's firm and announced myself to the receptionist. A few moments later, Mr. Harrison's executive assistant came to escort me upstairs. She led me not to his office, but to a small, private conference room. Inside, a woman was sitting at the table, staring into a cup of coffee. It was Jessica Reynolds. She looked up as I entered, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. Beside her stood another woman, a sharp-looking lawyer from the firm's HR department, and in the corner, a man in a quiet, professional suit stood impassively. I recognized him from a newspaper article. He was a detective with the white-collar crime division. Mr. Harrison had been busy. He had taken my evidence and set the stage. His team had approached Jessica the day before, laying out the proof of Mark's fraud and theft. Faced with the choice of being an accomplice or a witness, she had crumbled. She had told them everything. The presentation was in the main boardroom on the 40th floor, a magnificent room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I was ushered into an adjoining anteroom to wait, the detective and Jessica with me. Through the frosted glass, I could hear the murmur of voices, and then Mark's, confident and smooth as he began his pitch. I listened to him sell his vision, his ambition, his lies, to a room full of powerful men. He was charming, brilliant, and utterly convincing. For a horrifying moment, I felt a flicker of the old admiration, the pride I used to feel for him. Then I remembered the chuckle, and the feeling was replaced by cold, hard steel. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a round of applause. Mark had finished. Then, Mr. Harrison's voice cut through the room, calm and authoritative. "Excellent work, Mark. Truly. You've painted a compelling picture of future growth. But before we conclude, I believe your wife, Clara, has a few words to add. She has some unique insights into your long-term financial planning." The door to the boardroom swung open. It was my cue. With my head held high, I walked in. Every eye in the room turned to me. I saw the board members, their faces a mixture of confusion and curiosity. And I saw Mark. He was standing at the head of the table, a triumphant smile on his face, which froze and then curdled into a mask of pure shock and horror when he saw me. "Clara?" he stammered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? This is completely inappropriate." I didn't look at him. I addressed the room, my voice clear and steady, betraying none of the terror I felt inside. "Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Clara Miller. For the last 15 years, I have served as the unpaid chief financial officer, domestic manager, and social coordinator for my husband's career. Today, I'm here to present a brief but crucial addendum to his proposal. Let's call it Project Lighthouse." On the massive screen behind Mark, where his impressive sales projections had just been displayed, a new image appeared. It was the first email between him and Jessica, the one where they dreamed of their future together. A collective gasp went through the room. I advanced the slide. The next one showed the secret bank statements, with the hundreds of thousands of dollars he had embezzled from our family savings highlighted in red. The next slide showed his corporate expense reports, which Mr. Harrison's team had proven were fraudulent, full of fake client dinners and phantom travel costs. Mark was sputtering, his face a blotchy red. "This is a lie! She's mentally unstable. She's grieving, she's not thinking clearly." "Am I, Mark?" I asked, finally turning to look him in the eye. My voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent room. As if on cue, the door opened again and Jessica walked in, followed by the detective. Mark's jaw dropped. He looked from her to me, the color draining completely from his face as he realized the trap had been sprung. Jessica wouldn't look at him. She looked at Mr. Harrison. "He lied to me," she said, her voice trembling. "He told me they were separated. He lied about everything." I clicked to the final slide. It was a split image. On one side was the $2 million life insurance policy he had taken out on me. On the other, a list of his recent internet search history. Lethal dose of digoxin. How to induce a heart attack. Can an autopsy detect insulin overdose? A wave of revulsion swept through the boardroom. The silence was absolute, broken only by Mark's ragged breathing. His mask of charm and success had not just slipped, it had been violently ripped away, revealing the monster beneath. He opened his mouth to scream, to rage, to lie one more time, but no words came out. The detective stepped forward, his voice calm and professional. "Mark Miller, you're under arrest for suspicion of grand larceny, wire fraud, and corporate embezzlement." He paused, looking at the final slide. "And we will be opening a full investigation into conspiracy to commit murder." As the handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, Mark finally looked at me. In his eyes, I saw no remorse, no regret. Only pure, unadulterated hatred for the woman who had refused to be his victim. The fallout was swift and absolute. Mark was fired that same day, his dismissal for gross misconduct and criminal activity announced in a company-wide memo. His name once synonymous with success and ambition, became a cautionary tale whispered in the hallways. The corporate world he loved and had sacrificed his family for slammed its doors in his face permanently. Legally, the case against him was a fortress. The evidence I had gathered, combined with Jessica's testimony and the firm's own internal audit, was overwhelming. He was convicted on multiple counts of grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 10 years in a federal prison. The investigation into the conspiracy charges related to my mother and me was more complex, but the evidence was strong enough that the district attorney was confident in securing another, much longer sentence when it went to trial. His life, as he knew it, was over. He had lost his career, his reputation, his freedom, and his family, all because of his own greed and cruelty. Jessica was also fired, but by cooperating fully with the police and the firm, she avoided criminal charges. I never saw her again, and I never wanted to. In my eyes, she was not another victim. She was a willing participant in the destruction of my family. She saw an opportunity and took it, without a thought for the children she would be hurting. The divorce was uncontested. With Mark in prison and his assets frozen, he had no power to fight. The judge, having reviewed the evidence from the criminal case, was openly sympathetic to me. I was awarded everything: full and sole custody of our children, the house, his pension, and a court order to seize and liquidate every asset in his secret accounts to repay what he had stolen from us. The Project Lighthouse Fund, the money he had bled from our family to build his new life, would now be used to build ours. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with a satisfying, decisive blow. 1 year later, life is unrecognizably beautiful. I sold the big house on the tree-lined street. It was a beautiful cage, full of too many ghosts and bad memories. Liam, Sophie, and I now live in a smaller, sunnier house closer to my sister, in a neighborhood filled with the happy sounds of children playing. It's a home filled with laughter and light, not secrets and silence. The woman who was afraid to ask her husband about a strange scent on his collar is gone. In her place is a woman who is rediscovering her own strength. On Mr. Harrison's advice, and with his glowing recommendation, I took a few refresher courses and recertified my accounting credentials. He then offered me a job, not out of pity, but out of respect for my skills. I am now a senior financial analyst at his firm, leading a team of my own. I walk into that gleaming downtown skyscraper not as a victim, but as a respected executive. The work is challenging and fulfilling, and for the first time in 15 years, I have something that is truly mine. My own career, my own paycheck, my own success. Liam and Sophie are thriving. They are in therapy to process the trauma of their father's betrayal, but children are resilient. They have their mother back, not the subdued, anxious woman who walked on eggshells, but a confident, happy mom who is fully present. We have movie nights and build forts in the living room. We take weekend trips to the beach. We are healing together. I have reconnected with old friends, the ones I drifted away from during my marriage. My relationship with my sister is stronger than ever. I am surrounded by a fortress of love and support. Sometimes, in the quiet moments after the kids are asleep, the grief for my mother still washes over me. But it's a clean grief now, unburdened by the poison of Mark's betrayal. I honor her by living the full, authentic life she always wanted for me. I am financially independent, emotionally free, and finally, truly at peace. If you take anything away from my story, I hope it's this: trust your gut. That little voice inside you that whispers something is wrong, it's not paranoia, it's your intuition, and it's the most powerful tool you have. The little red flags, the things you explain away, are rarely isolated incidents. They are threads of a much larger, darker tapestry. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small or guilty for asking questions or for needing reassurance. You deserve to feel safe and respected in your own life. And please, hear me on this. Your worth is not defined by someone else's inability to see it. Their betrayal, their lies, their cruelty, that is a reflection of their brokenness, not yours. You are not responsible for their choices. You are only responsible for how you rise from the ashes. Grief, as painful as it is, can be a powerful catalyst for truth. It strips away the non-essential and shows you what is real. And sometimes, help and alliances will come from the most unexpected places. Don't be afraid to accept it. You are stronger than you think, and you are never, ever truly alone. Thank you so much for watching and for listening to my story today. It means the world to me to be able to share it with this incredible community. If any part of this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps more than you know. Drop a comment below and share a time you trusted your intuition. Let's empower each other. You are not alone. We are all in this together. Stay blessed, stay strong, and remember, the truth always, always comes out.